The grain inspector didn't even look him in the eye when he stamped "feed grade" on the paperwork. 3 years of back-breaking labor entirely written off. Nathaniel Lawson was 90 seconds away from total bankruptcy until a private jet from Tokyo touched down with a completely different verdict. The dust in the way station of the regional elevator in Whitman County, Washington, tasted like copper and diesel exhaust. For Nathaniel Lawson, it usually tasted like victory. This time of year, after the grueling mid-August harvest in the rolling hills of the Palouse, a farmer's fate was decided in this small air-conditioned office. Nathaniel stood by the window, his calloused hands stuffed into the pockets of his denim jacket, watching 70 tons of his carefully cultivated winter wheat sitting in the belly of a tandem-axle Peterbilt truck. This wasn't just any wheat. This was a resurrected heritage strain, a complex, hard white wheat that Nathaniel had risked his family's 4th-generation farm to grow. He had bypassed the commercial genetically modified high-yield seeds pushed by the agricultural conglomerates. Instead, he had gambled everything on flavor soil health and a premium market. Behind the counter stood Richard Stanton. Richard was the senior purchasing agent for one of the largest multinational grain syndicates operating in the Pacific Northwest. He was a man who wore crisp polo shirts to a farming facility, his fingernails perpetually clean. His eyes always calculating the spread between a farmer's desperation and corporate profit. "I'm running it through the Hagberg machine. One more time, Nate," Richard said, his voice dripping with a practiced synthetic sympathy. "But I have to tell you it's not looking good. The Hagberg falling number test. It was the absolute judge, jury, and executioner of the global wheat market. It measured the enzyme activity in the grain, specifically how fast starch was breaking down into sugar. Commercial bakeries demanded a falling number of at least 300 seconds to ensure their mass-produced bread would rise perfectly and not turn gummy. The machine beeped, a sharp mechanical sound that pierced the quiet hum of the office. Richard pulled the narrow receipt from the printer, let out a long, heavy sigh and slid it across the linoleum counter. 165, Richard said softly. "It's sprout damaged, Nate. The alpha amylase enzymes are off the charts. The starches are already converting to sugars. No commercial bakery on earth will touch this. It'll turn a bread loaf into a brick of wet clay." Nathaniel felt the blood drain from his face. "That's impossible, Richard. We had a dry harvest. There was no pre-harvest rain to trigger sprouting. The moisture content is sitting perfectly at 11%. Pull another sample from the back of the trailer." "I pulled 3 samples, Nate," Richard replied, tapping the paper with a customized corporate pen. "The numbers don't lie. This heritage strain you planted, it's temperamental. It mutated. The enzymes are hyperactive. For flour, this harvest is completely worthless." Silence stretched between them. Nathaniel thought of the $450,000 operational loan held by Cascade Regional Bank. The note was due in 14 days. He thought of his wife, Claire, who had spent the last 2 months running the combine harvester until midnight just to save on labor costs. "So what are you saying?" Nathaniel asked, his voice tightening. "I'm saying I can't pay you the premium bakery rate. I can't even pay you the baseline commodity rate," Richard said, folding his arms. "By corporate policy, I have to classify this entire 40,000 bushel yield as feed grade. Cattle feed, Nate. I can give you $3 a bushel. It's the best I can do to take it off your hands. $3 a bushel. It was an insult. It wouldn't even cover the cost of the diesel fuel Nathaniel had burned to plant it. It would mean the immediate foreclosure of the Lawson farm. But as Nathaniel looked into Richard's eyes, he saw something that made his stomach churn. It wasn't pity. It was a poorly concealed glimmer of satisfaction. Nathaniel remembered a rumor he'd heard at the local diner a month prior. Richard Stanton's brother-in-law owned a massive corporate farming operation just 2 miles south of Nathaniel's property. They had been trying to buy Nathaniel out for a decade to consolidate the acreage, but Nathaniel had always refused to sell. If Nathaniel defaulted on the bank loan, the land would go to public auction, and Richard's family would scoop up prime Palouse acreage for pennies on the dollar. "You ran the test on the wrong calibration, didn't you?" Nathaniel said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Excuse me," Richard scoffed, stepping back. "You knew this heritage grain required a different milling temperature for the Hagberg test. You intentionally scorched the sample to artificially spike the enzyme reading," Nathaniel accused, leaning over the counter. "You're trying to force me into a fire sale. That's a serious accusation, Lawson," Richard said, his tone turning ice cold. "I am following standard federal grain inspection protocols. $3 a bushel. Take it or get your truck off my scale. You have a bank note due on the 1st of the month. Where else are you going to unload 40,000 bushels of defective grain before then?" Richard had him cornered, and they both knew it. No other elevator within 300 miles would defy a logged federal-grade test. The grain was officially blacklisted. Nathaniel looked at the paper. He looked at the smug corporate buyer. Then he reached out, grabbed the feed-grade contract, and ripped it squarely in half. "I'd rather burn it in the fields than sell it to you," Nathaniel said. He turned on his heel, walked out of the air-conditioned office, and climbed into his Peterbilt. As he fired up the massive diesel engine, blowing a cloud of black smoke toward the way station window, Nathaniel realized he had just made the most reckless decision of his life. He was hauling 70 tons of worthless grain back to his farm, with exactly 14 days to figure out how to save his family's legacy. The return drive to the farm was a blur of rural highways and rising panic. When Nathaniel finally pulled the heavy rig onto his gravel driveway, Claire was waiting on the porch. She took one look at the fully loaded trailer and the expression on her husband's face, and she knew. That night, sitting at the kitchen table under the harsh glare of a single pendant light, Nathaniel laid out the catastrophic reality. "He rigged the grading Claire," Nathaniel said, rubbing his exhausted eyes. "He stamped it as feed. If we sell it to the cattle lots, we gross maybe 120 grand. The bank wants 450. We lose the house. We lose the tractors. We lose the land." Claire, a pragmatic woman who handled the farm's labyrinthine accounting, didn't cry. She pulled out her laptop. "Then we don't sell it for feed. We have 14 days. Who else buys wheat independent bakers, artisanal pasta makers? We bypass the syndicate." For the next 5 days, their farmhouse became a frantic war room. Nathaniel and Claire cold-called every independent mill and commercial bakery from Seattle to Portland. They overnighted samples in Ziploc bags. The rejections were swift and brutal. Nate, I'd love to help, but a Hagberg number of 165, the dough will literally dissolve on my prep tables. "It's too volatile, Lawson. We can't scale a recipe with this kind of enzyme activity." By day 8, the reality of their situation began to set in. The wheat was sitting in 2 massive, aging, galvanized steel silos behind the barn. To make matters worse, the local meteorologist was predicting a freak early September rainstorm. Nathaniel's silos had hairline roof leaks. If water got in and the grain temperature spiked, the wheat would begin to ferment and rot. It wouldn't even be fit for cattle. It was 3 a.m. on the 9th day. Nathaniel was sitting in the dark glow of the computer monitor, nursing his 4th cup of black coffee. He was mindlessly scrolling through agricultural forums looking for a miracle that didn't exist. He had ventured deep into niche corners of the internet, reading academic papers on cereal chemistry. He stumbled onto a highly technical forum titled The Fermentation Guild. It wasn't a baking site. It was an international message board for master brewers and distillers. Nathaniel stared at the screen. He remembered Richard Stanton's mocking words at the grain elevator. "The alpha amylase enzymes are off the charts. The starches are already converting to sugars. Bakers hated starches converting to sugars because it ruined the structure of bread. But what did brewers need more than anything else in the world to feed yeast and create alcohol? Fermentable sugars. His heart hammered against his ribs. It was a wild, desperate leap of logic. Commercial brewers primarily used barley, not raw winter wheat, precisely because wheat was usually too hard to convert into sugar. But Nathaniel's wheat was mutating. It was breaking itself down. It was preloaded with the exact enzymes a brewer would kill for. With trembling fingers, Nathaniel created an account. He typed out a frantic, detailed post. He didn't ask for pity. He posted the brutal scientific truth. He uploaded the exact Hagberg falling numbers, the protein matrix, the moisture content, and the specific heritage lineage of his white winter wheat. Sitting on 40,000 bushels of high-enzyme, sprout-activated heritage wheat, Nathaniel typed. Bakers won't touch it. Looking for a brewer who understands cereal chemistry. Location Washington State. Need to move it in 5 days. He hit submit. Then he put his head down on the desk and finally let the exhaustion take him. When he woke up 4 hours later, sunlight was streaming through the window. Claire was shaking his shoulder. "Nate," she said, her voice tight. "Your computer has been pinging for the last 20 minutes. Nathaniel rubbed his face and squinted at the screen. He had one direct message on the forum. It was sent at 6:15 a.m. from an IP address in Tokyo, Japan. The sender's profile simply read, Leon Croft, Director of Liquid Innovation. Nathaniel clicked open the message. "Mr. Lawson, my name is Leon Croft. I am the head of overseas ingredient acquisition for a premium beverage syndicate based in Tokyo. We are currently trying to revive an extinct 19th century style of European farmhouse ale. The recipe requires a highly specific, rapidly converting wheat profile that modern agriculture has bred out of existence. I saw your Hagberg specs. If your numbers are accurate, you're defective. Wheat is the exact holy grail of enzyme activity I have been searching for across 3 continents for the last 2 years. I need a physical sample immediately. Do not sell a single grain to the feedlots." Nathaniel felt the air leave his lungs. He immediately replied, asking where to send it. Leon provided a corporate address in the Minato ward of Tokyo. "Claire," Nathaniel yelled, vaulting out of his chair. "Get a FedEx box, a big one. I'm going to the silo." He ran out into the crisp morning air, climbed the steel ladder of the silo, and scooped 5 pounds of the golden grain into a heavy plastic bag. He drove his truck 90 miles an hour to the regional shipping hub in Spokane to catch the international overnight dispatch. Then the hardest part began. The waiting. Day 10 passed. Day 11. The sky above the Palouse turned a bruised, ominous purple as the threatened rainstorm moved closer. The bank loan was due in exactly 72 hours. On the evening of day 12, Nathaniel was sitting on the porch, watching the first few drops of rain hit the dry dirt. He held a wrench in his hand, preparing to climb the silos and desperately try to tarp the leaking roofs. He had failed. The FedEx tracking showed the package had been delivered in Tokyo 24 hours ago, but Leon Croft had vanished into thin air. No emails, no calls. Just as Nathaniel stood up to climb the ladder, his cell phone vibrated in his pocket. The caller ID displayed a string of numbers he didn't recognize, beginning with a +81 international code. Nathaniel swallowed hard and answered. Lawson Farm. "Nathaniel." A sharp, energetic voice crackled through the line. "It's Leon Croft. Did you get the sample?" Nathaniel asked, gripping the wooden porch railing so hard his knuckles turned white. "I got it," Leon said. The background noise on the phone sounded chaotic machinery, humming people speaking rapidly in Japanese. "I took it straight into our micro-malting lab. We did a rapid enzyme wash and a pilot mash test. And," Nathaniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. There was a pause on the line. "Nathaniel, who told you this grain was worthless. The regional buyer, Nathaniel replied defensive. Apex Syndicate said it was only fit for cattle. Leon let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. The regional buyer is an absolute idiot. The conversion efficiency on your wheat is staggering. The flavor profile is pulling notes of toasted clove and wild honey. It is arguably the most perfect brewing wheat I have ever handled in my 25-year career. Nathaniel closed his eyes as a wave of dizzying relief washed over him. So, you want to buy some of it? Some of it? Leon asked, his tone suddenly dead serious. Nathaniel, I am sitting in the boardroom right now with my chief financial officer. How far are you from the Spokane International Airport? About an hour and a half, Nathaniel stammered. Good, Leon said, because I just chartered a flight. I'm leaving Tokyo in 3 hours. I'm coming to Washington to buy all 40,000 bushels, every last grain. 36 hours later, the threatening skies over Whitman County finally broke. A cold, relentless drizzle began to fall on the Palouse, turning the dust of the Lawson farm into a slick, treacherous mud. Nathaniel stood in the driveway, soaked to the bone, watching the headlights of a rented black Chevrolet Suburban cut through the darkness. The vehicle threw gravel as it slid to a halt near the barn. The doors opened, and 2 men stepped out into the freezing Washington rain. The first was Leon Croft. He wore a tailored wool overcoat that looked entirely out of place on a muddy farm, his eyes bloodshot from the 14-hour trans-Pacific flight and the subsequent drive from Spokane. Beside him was a stern-looking man carrying a leather briefcase whom Leon quickly introduced as Arthur Pendleton, the brewery's Seattle-based acquisitions attorney. "Show it to me," Leon said, skipping the pleasantries entirely. He didn't care about the mud ruining his leather shoes. He didn't care about the rain. He was a man possessed by the pursuit of perfection. Nathaniel led them around the back of the barn to the towering galvanized steel silos. He unlatched the heavy bottom access hatch. The rich, earthy scent of the stored winter wheat spilled out into the damp night air. Leon dropped to his knees in the mud. He reached into the mountain of grain, pulling out a handful. He held it up to the beam of Nathaniel's flashlight, examining the slight discoloration on the hull of the kernels, the exact physical manifestation of the hyperactive enzymes that had caused Richard Stanton to condemn the harvest. Leon popped a few kernels into his mouth and chewed slowly, closing his eyes as he analyzed the starch breakdown. "Incredible," Leon whispered, the rain matting his hair to his forehead. "The local mills called this defective. They are absolute fools. The sugar conversion is already happening on the pallet. Arthur drafted the letter of intent. Right now." Arthur opened his briefcase on the hood of Nathaniel's truck, shielding the paperwork with an umbrella. "Mr. Lawson, our syndicate is prepared to offer you $18 a bushel for the entire 40,000 bushel yield. Furthermore, we will cover all freight and export logistics to the port of Seattle." Nathaniel's knees almost buckled. $18 a bushel. That was a total payout of $720,000. It was 6 times what Richard Stanton had offered for cattle feed. It was enough to pay off the bank loan, entirely repair the farm's aging equipment, and secure their financial future for the next 5 years. "I'll sign it," Nathaniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "But we have a major problem. The bank loan is due tomorrow at 5 p.m., and my silos are leaking. If this rain gets heavy, the moisture will spike, and the grain will actually rot before you can get it to the port." Leon pulled out his cell phone, wiping the rain from the screen. "Then we don't wait for morning. I already wired the funds to an escrow account in Seattle before I boarded my flight. Arthur just needs your signature to release it to your bank. As for the grain..." Leon smiled a fierce, competitive grin. "Look down the highway, Nathaniel." Nathaniel turned. Through the driving rain, he saw a line of headlights snaking down the rural 2-lane road. The rumble of heavy diesel engines shook the ground. Leon hadn't just chartered a private jet. He had used his syndicate's deep pockets to hire an entire fleet of independent hopper-bottom transport trucks out of Idaho. But as the first massive truck prepared to turn into the Lawson driveway, another vehicle recklessly cut it off. A sleek, silver pickup truck slammed on its brakes, blocking the entrance to the farm. The driver's door swung open, and Richard Stanton stepped out into the rain. Richard had been tipped off. In a small farming community, you couldn't hire 20 commercial trucks in the middle of the night without the local syndicate finding out. Richard knew Nathaniel's bank deadline was hours away. He had come to deliver the final crushing blow and force the foreclosure. "Shut it down," Richard yelled, marching up the driveway toward Nathaniel and Leon. "No one is loading this grain." Nathaniel stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides. "You have no jurisdiction here, Richard. Get off my property." "I have the jurisdiction of the Federal Grain Commission. Lawson," Richard sneered, pulling a laminated clipboard from his jacket. "You can't export this wheat. I officially graded this harvest as feed quality. International export laws require a commercial grade certification for human consumption. If you try to put this on a ship to Japan, customs will seize it at the port, and you'll go to federal prison for agricultural fraud." Richard turned to Leon, looking him up and down with arrogant disdain. "I don't know who you are, pal, but you're wasting your time. He can't legally sell this to you, but I can take it off his hands for $3 a bushel right now, save him the legal trouble, and haul it to the cattle lots." It was a brilliant, malicious trap. Richard was using bureaucratic red tape to strangle the deal at the 11th hour. Nathaniel felt his heart drop. He looked at Arthur, the attorney. Leon Croft didn't even blink. He calmly stepped into Richard's personal space, radiating the quiet, terrifying confidence of a man backed by a billion-dollar international corporation. "You must be the local syndicate buyer," Leon said, his voice dangerously smooth. "I'm Leon Croft, and you are severely misinformed about international export law," Richard scoffed. "Read the regulations, Croft. Feed grade doesn't cross the ocean." "It doesn't cross the ocean for food production," Arthur Pendleton interjected, stepping out from beneath his umbrella, holding a stack of legally bound documents. Under Section 4, Paragraph B of the International Agricultural Trade Agreement grain, classified with high enzymatic activity, that is strictly designated for fermentation and distillation, is exempt from standard commercial baking grades. It falls under industrial processing. Arthur handed Richard a laminated legal injunction. "We aren't baking bread, Mr. Stanton. We are brewing alcohol. This grain has been officially reclassified by the Japanese Ministry of Finance as a raw brewing commodity. Your feed grade stamp is legally irrelevant. Now move your truck, or I will have the state police arrest you for trespassing and tortious interference with a multinational trade contract." Richard stared at the paperwork, the color draining from his face. The smug corporate invincibility he had worn at the way station shattered in an instant. He looked at Nathaniel, who was glaring back at him with unapologetic triumph. "You're making a mistake, Nate," Richard stammered, though his voice lacked any real power. "You cross the syndicate, you'll never sell grain in this county again." "I don't plan to," Nathaniel replied. "I have a new buyer. Now get off my land before I let the dogs out." Humiliated and defeated, Richard backed away, climbed into his silver pickup, and sped off into the rainy night. Leon turned to the line of idling trucks on the highway and signaled them forward. "All right, gentlemen, let's get this grain out of the rain." The next 12 hours were a masterclass in organized chaos. Under the glare of industrial halogen work lights, the fleet of independent truckers worked through the driving rain to empty the silos. The heavy augers roared, transferring the golden wheat from the steel bins into the belly of the transport trailers. At exactly 8:15 a.m., as the final truck pulled away from the farm headed west toward the port of Seattle, Nathaniel and Claire sat in their kitchen with Arthur Pendleton. Arthur hit a button on his laptop. 2 minutes later, Nathaniel's phone buzzed with an alert from Cascade Regional Bank. Incoming wire transfer, $720,000. account status paid in full. Claire buried her face in her hands and wept, the crushing weight of the last 3 years finally lifting from her shoulders. Nathaniel pulled his wife into a tight embrace, staring at the zero balance on his loan portal. They had done the impossible. They had fought the syndicate, survived the weather, and saved their legacy. 8 months later, the landscape of the Palouse had changed. Spring had arrived, painting the rolling hills in vibrant emerald green. Nathaniel was riding high in the cab of a brand-new John Deere tractor, prepping the soil for the next planting season. He didn't have to worry about Richard Stanton anymore. After the international deal made headlines in agricultural trade magazines, exposing how Richard had manipulated the Hagberg testing to try and steal a local farmer's land, a massive internal audit was triggered. Richard was quietly fired from the syndicate, his reputation in the agricultural community permanently destroyed. When Nathaniel returned to the farmhouse for lunch, Claire was waiting on the porch, holding a heavy wooden crate that had just been delivered via international courier. The return address was the Minato Ward, Tokyo. Nathaniel pried the wooden lid open with a crowbar. Inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, were 6 heavy glass bottles, sealed with dark wax. They were the first production run of the brewery's revived 19th-century farmhouse ale. Nathaniel pulled one of the bottles out and inspected the label. It was printed in beautiful minimalist Japanese calligraphy, but beneath it, written in bold English lettering, was the name of the beer, the Lawson Heritage, brewed exclusively with wild enzyme winter wheat from Whitman County, Washington. Included in the crate was a handwritten note from Leon Croft. Nathaniel, the beer is a masterpiece. It just won double gold at the International Brewing Awards in Munich. The demand is astronomical, and we are scaling up production. Enclosed is your new supplier contract. We want you to plant 2,000 acres of your worthless wheat next season. We'll buy every single grain. Cheers. Nathaniel smiled, looking out over his land. The soil was rich, the farm was secure, and the future was brighter than he could have ever imagined. He grabbed a bottle opener, popped the wax seal, and poured 2 glasses of the rich amber liquid. He handed one to Claire. They stood on the porch of the farm that his great-grandfather had built, clinking their glasses together. It didn't taste like defeat, and it certainly didn't taste like cattle feed. It tasted like victory. What a story of absolute resilience. Nathaniel proved that when the system tries to crush you, sometimes you just have to rewrite the rules. If you loved this incredible true-to-life farming drama of beating the corporate syndicate, hit that like button. Right now, share this video with anyone who needs a reminder to never give up on their hard work. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable stories of underdogs coming out on top. See you next time.